After all, he's used to being alone, but she at least had a few friends, and now they've all disappeared. She claims she'll be perfectly fine as long as she has him. In any case, he offers to partner up with her so they can find 3 other people. With Chloe's abilities, she'll be a huge asset to him. He can only fight for 30 seconds, so she's like 30 soldiers packed into one adorable package. The peace in the classroom is shattered as Rachel comes charging in, calling for Gamma. He doesn't bother hiding his annoyance at seeing her again. And Chloe doesn't hide her killer intent either as she whips out a box cutter. Rachel continues to bother him, even draping herself over his desk. Then she asks if he's found a group to take the test with yet. Since she's clearly not going to listen to him, he just answers her question. The fact that he doesn't have a team is perfect for her, as she immediately invites him to join her group. Gamma is suspicious of the sudden offer, since there's definitely a long line of other students who would kill to join her group. So why would she approach him specifically? She tells him flat out that he seems more fun to take the test with than any of the other students. Gamma then tells her that he's already teamed up with Chloe, but that's fine too, since Rachel's group has 2 spots left. Gamma is still suspicious of the whole arrangement, since this is a much bigger risk for Rachel. Pulling a stunt like this could jeopardize her grades if they underperform on the island test. He glances at Chloe, and she gives a reluctant nod, agreeing to join the group. With nothing holding him back anymore, he tells Rachel he'll join. Rachel immediately pulls out her phone to text someone after telling him there's no backing out now. Then Gamma asks who the other members of the group are. The first person she mentions is none other than Lion. Not just any Lion, the bootleg protagonist of this world. And the one person Gamma wants to interact with the least. Gamma can't help but wonder what crimes he committed in his past life to be cursed with such terrible luck. I mean, yeah, he spent 30 years wielding a knife, but that was for his job. For some unknown reason, he keeps getting involved with the heroines. And even though he tried his best not to stand out, he's still getting tangled up in the main story. At least the heroines are some nice eye candy for him, and it's not so bad getting involved with pretty girls. The real problem is Lion Van Reinhardt. He's the main character, and interacting with him will definitely send the main plot completely off the rails. Right now, Gamma has no clue how things will pan out in the future, but he's sure that one way or another, everything will be his fault. He even tried to see if he could change his group, but Rachel already put his name on the application before even talking to him. This is the first time in his life he has wanted to throttle a girl so badly. And then, of course, there's the biggest issue of all, the yandere he shares a class with. And speak of the devil, she comes up right beside him to ask how he's doing, since he's looked completely petrified ever since Rachel left. Model. He admits he's just a little intimidated at the thought of taking the exam alongside Star Class cadets. Clue reassures him, saying no one in Star Class is stronger than he is, and he offers a weak thanks. He did choose to partner with Chloe after all, so bailing on her now wouldn't sit right with him. In fact, when he thinks about it more rationally, he realizes there probably isn't a better team for him to take the test with. This could actually be a great opportunity if only he weren't so pessimistic. He asks Chloe for the time and place of their first group meeting, and she tells him it's at a cafe right on campus. Since it's almost time for the meeting, he suggests they head over now. They arrive first, and both he and Chloe grab a drink for themselves. Clue orders a delicious-looking avocado smoothie, and Gamma can only stare in envy, painfully aware of how much a single cup of that stuff costs. He then takes a sip of his own cheap espresso and nearly recoils from the awful taste. Since this is an off-campus cafe, the Academy's faculty cards are useless here, which means for the very first time he's forced to spend his own money, just as he's starting to question all his life choices. His phone buzzes with a text from Rachel, saying she's nearby. Sure enough, she walks in moments later with Lion and another person trailing behind her. Lion and Gamma lock eyes for the first time, and then Gamma's gaze shifts to the guy next to him. His first impression of the newcomer is that he looks like some kind of delinquent. Lion is the first to speak, extending a hand to our MC as he introduces himself. Gamma accepts the handshake, and Lion compliments him on his performance in the subspace battle a few days ago. Gamma can immediately tell from his speech that Lion is a perfect mix of sharp and classy. Once they're all seated, Rachel suggests they do proper introductions. Lion goes first, introducing himself as the group's leader and a student from Star Class. He mentions he somehow ended up as the group's leader and seems genuinely excited to be working with everyone. Rachel is up next, but since everyone at the table already knows her, she just passes the turn to the person next to her. His name is Speed Weapon, and he's also a Star Class student. His introduction is brief and to the point, but Gamma is more intrigued by his very unusual name. Clue introduces herself next, explaining that she's a student from Wolf Class who got into the group thanks to Gamma. Rachel teases her for calling Gamma Jamun instead, prompting a brief stare down between the two before Chloe sighs, collects herself, and finishes her introduction. Finally, it's Gamma's turn. Gamma introduces himself, and his intro is even shorter and more direct than Speed Weapons, consisting only of his name and his class. The others acknowledge his awkwardly brief introduction, and Lion pulls out a laptop to get to the main point of their meeting. He hits a key, and a holographic map of their exam region projects from the device. The exam site is called Scopuli Island, and they'll be teleported to a specific location on the island via a subspace gate. However, only the gate itself is a subspace, which means that once they're on the island, everything will be real. They can be genuinely injured by the demonic beasts there. Their team has been assigned the northeastern coast, where 3 groups, including theirs, will be hunting mermen. Since there's a limited number of mermen in the area, the objective is to hunt as many as possible before the quota is met. With the briefing complete, Lion ends the presentation and opens the floor for questions. Speed Weapon goes first, asking if there are any other risks on the island besides the mermen. The instructors have already scouted the island to ensure there are no other monsters or demons present aside from the mermen. Clue then asks if they're allowed to ambush and fight other groups, much to the shock of her teammates. Lion calmly assures her that the exam's sole objective is to exterminate demonic beasts. Any conflict between the groups will result in immediate disqualification. That question was probably just her assassin instincts kicking in, with no other questions from the team. Lion dismisses the meeting, telling everyone to prepare for the midterms until they gather again tomorrow for another planning session. The other cadets file out of the cafe, leaving Gamma and Lion alone. The atmosphere turns awkward and Gamma starts to make a hasty exit, but Lion suddenly calls out to him. The seemingly perfect protagonist asks Gamma where he came from. Gamma freezes, taking a moment to process Lion's strange question. He's heard a similar question before, but coming from Lion, it feels fundamentally different. Lion also has a dead serious expression, and Gamma has no idea what he's thinking. Lion could have asked this during their introductions, but he specifically waited until everyone else was gone, noticing the prolonged silence. Leon apologizes for asking such an abrupt question, explaining that he just can't shake the feeling that Gamma is a lot like him. Sure, the world's official language is Korean, since the game was developed there, but that doesn't mean other cultures are non-existent. Anyone could tell Gamma is Korean just by looking at him. So for Leon to ask where he's from and claim they're similar is just plain odd. As Gamma continues to stare in silent confusion, trying to process this bizarre conversation, Leon tells him to just forget he said anything, then gets up and leaves the cafe. But Gamma stops him and throws the question right back at Leon, asking where he's from. It was a total reflex, and Gamma instantly regrets it, but he knows he won't be able to sleep tonight without an answer. Leon calmly takes Gamma's hand and tells our MC that he's from Germany. Without another word, he leaves, leaving Gamma to wonder what in the world has gotten into Leon all of a sudden. For a moment back there, when Leon first asked the question, Gamma had wondered if the main character of this game had also been transported from another world. It's a wild thought, but it's also a very real possibility. After all, there's no rule saying only one person can be pulled into this video game, and possessing the main character seems way more likely than possessing an extra. Gamma glances down at the knife on his table and gets an idea. Whenever the blessing of the sword god activates, his senses become strangely heightened. Perhaps activating the blessing now could give him some answers. He picks up the knife, removes its sheath, and just as he hoped, a message enters his mind, confirming that Leon really is from this world. This voice feels familiar, just like when he fought Chloe. Whenever he activates the blessing of the sword god, he can faintly hear a voice. Trying to focus on it, however, gives him a migraine so intense that it bypasses his painlessness blessing. Regardless, the Leon he met today is definitely the Leon from the game. No actor could ever replicate the character so perfectly. It's just so weird that Leon would ask what country he was from out of the blue, and that claim about the two of them being similar is also pretty concerning. He checks a wiki page, but there's no information about Leon in this world. Things are getting too weird, and Gamma decides this is the last time he's getting involved with Leon. If anything like this happens again, he'll just go to media for answers, while strategically ignoring her attempts to elope with him, of course. Gamma is also surprised by how calm he's managed to stay considering all the crazy situations he's been in lately. Maybe it's another effect of his blessings. He pulls up his status screen, and as usual, it looks like he's making steady progress. His mental fortitude and armament are the same, but his physical fortitude has gone up thanks to all his training. His armament will probably increase too once he gets Murasami from the midterm exams. The only thing he's unsure about is the assimilation rate. It's gone up by a lot and seems like it's close to unlocking something special. He wonders if it's related to his actions so far. Still, it's annoying not knowing what it is, and it's not like he can just ask someone for help. At the bottom of the status screen, however, something new has appeared. His blessing of painlessness has increased by 10 seconds, meaning he can now use it for a total of 40 seconds. It seems like, after all this time, his efforts are finally paying off. The days fly by with the groups meeting up to plan their exam strategies, and Gamma keeps training and honing his skills until finally the day of the exam arrives. All the groups are standing in front of the subspace gate, and Gamma can tell it has a completely different vibe than the one for the training grounds. The rest of his team arrives, and they all seem just as pumped as he is. In their previous meetings, they'd already decided on everyone's roles. Rachel will be on the front lines as the main damage dealer, while Leon takes the center position as the leader to coordinate the team. Speed Weapon will be right behind Leon as support, and Chloe will work alongside Rachel as a secondary damage dealer. Finally, Gamma will bring up the rear, guarding their backs, making for a solid team composition. Gamma takes a second to admire their powerful equipment. Rachel is rocking S-rank gear called the Vermilion Phoenix Halberd, and while Leon doesn't have Beilong yet, he's still wielding a powerful sword. Lastly, Speed Weapon's gear is a recorder. Gamma didn't realize the support role also provided musical entertainment. Rachel assures him that the recorder is actually one of the few S-rank items that can provide healing. And even Gamma knows that a healing S-rank armament is ridiculously rare. Owning something like that is incredible, and he moves in for a closer look, much to Speed Weapon's surprise. Their chat is cut short by an intercom announcement. The first-year midterms are about to begin. The instructor for the Wolf class, Lee Wanbin, then comes over to address the students' model. Since they already have a good handle on the rules, he keeps the briefing short and sweet. He tells them not to hesitate to run away if things get crazy. There's no point in risking their lives for some extra credit. If they get injured or want to give up, they can just call for an instructor. Now that the exam is officially starting, Lion tells them to do their best and not be nervous. Chloe looks anxious, so Gamma asks what's wrong. She reminds him that mermaids have been known to appear on the island, but Gamma assures her that the instructors already confirmed the area is clear. Chloe tries to take his word for it, but she can't shake her nerves. Back in her hometown of Sicily, mermaid sightings were common, and they were known for causing massive damage. Humans have a truce with demonic beings now, so they're rarely seen outside of dungeons. But the fact that these rumors still persist, and the conditions for a mermaid's appearance are still unconfirmed, even with the truce, worries her. He places a hand on her head to calm her down. As the instructors call for the cadets to step through the gate, she smiles and decides to put her trust in Gamma. Much later, she hears Gamma's voice calling out to her through a mental haze. It seems she lost focus for a moment, and now everything has been turned upside down. When she opens her eyes, she sees Gamma and the others standing before something huge and powerful. Rachel asks Speed Weapon if he's been able to contact an instructor, but since they're in a cave, he doesn't have any service on his phone. Meanwhile, someone is lying on the ground, bleeding and clearly in danger. And right in front of them is the cause of all this chaos, a mermaid. Now let's rewind a bit to see how our group ended up in this mess. As soon as they arrived on Scopuli Island, the first problem they ran into was motion sickness from the gate. The only one who seems okay is Gamma, who explains that he just doesn't get motion sick. Shortly after they had their first run-in with a merman, it stared at them, surprised for a second before scurrying off. As nasty as they look, it was way smaller than Gamma had expected. Lion confirms that the one they saw is too small to be worth any points. To find the adult mermen, the group needs to head to their assigned location. Chloe runs ahead to scout while the rest of the group follows at a slower pace. Eventually, they reach their destination and Chloe returns from scouting to report her findings. She tells them there's a cave about 550 yards ahead. She leads them to it, and before they even set foot inside the dark, ominous cave, they can see dozens of eyes staring back at them. Lion figures there are about 50 to 60 mermen in the cave, all gathered around a campfire. Taking down that many mermen would definitely guarantee them first place in the midterms. But the group has to put their safety first. Entering the cave would cut off their cell service, making it hard to contact an instructor. It's a high-risk, high-reward situation, and the final call rests with their group leader, Leon. Before they even got to the island, he had carefully assigned a role to every member of the team. So now it's his time to lead them to another victory. After a moment, Lion makes his decision and sends Rachel in to start the attack. Rachel rears back and hurls a golden spear deep into the cave. The spear lands right in the campfire, extinguishing it and startling the mermen. Before they can see where the attack came from, Rachel is already on them. And in a flash, several merman heads go flying. Speed Weapon is next, using his power to buff Rachel's skills, which helps her pick them off one by one. Gamma can only gasp in awe at Rachel's power. That display doesn't go unnoticed by Chloe, of course. The yandere draws her katana and activates her own blessing to join the fight against the mermen. She immediately rushes in to match Rachel's kill count, cutting down more and more mermen as the two of them charge toward each other. They don't slow down one bit as they get closer and closer, and Gamma starts to worry they have no intention of stopping at all. They get within inches of colliding, before they both pivot, taking out a final merman that was rushing between them. They then leap away from each other and continue the slaughter while Gamma lets out a huge sigh of relief. In the end, he'd been worried about them for nothing. With their combined efforts, all 60 mermen were slain. It looks like their work here is done, and Lion suggests they move on to continue the exam elsewhere. That kind of sharp leadership and determination is what makes the blonde main character the heart of their team. It just further proves to Gamma that Lion really is the true protagonist of this world. There's no way anyone else could replicate those heroic qualities. As Gamma's mind wanders, he momentarily looks away from Lion. He glances back up just in time to see the blonde hero crumble to the ground, having taken a fatal blow to the stomach. The others can only stare in shock as a powerful entity emerges from the pile of dead mermen behind Gamma. It's a demonoid mermaid, the very monster Chloe feared would make an unwelcome appearance on the island. Gamma knew things had been going a little too smoothly for them. Now the big question is whether they should run for it or stand their ground and fight. There's no guarantee they can even reach safety, especially while trying to protect an injured lion. Rachel tells Speed Weapon to call the instructors and let them know a mermaid has appeared. But just as Gamma suspected the cave is interfering with their connection, making it impossible to contact anyone. Everyone starts to panic, and it seems like Gamma is the only one keeping a cool head at the moment. With Lion out of commission, there's only one person who can step up and take charge. He steps forward and begins giving orders to his teammates. He tells Rachel to keep the remaining mermen off their backs no matter what. Next, he orders Speed Weapon to pour every healing blessing he has into Lion. Finally, he snaps Chloe, who seems to have zoned out back to reality, telling her to evacuate the other cadets and inform the instructors about the situation. It takes a second for his words to register, but she eventually scrambles off to follow his orders. With everyone now having their orders, Gamma turns to face the mermaid himself, much to the astonishment of his teammates. He tells Rachel and Speed Weapon that he's leaving the rest of the mermen to them. As for the mermaid, he remarks that cutting up big fish is his specialty, so this one's all his. Demons wield a unique power similar to human blessings. It's called magic, and it's so powerful that it took down the story's protagonist in a single hit. This highlights the massive power gap between humans and demons. Even though Gamma has the blessing of the Sword God, it's no guarantee he'll survive this fight. Even back in the original game, it was impossible to defeat a magic-wielding demon without a full party. And yet here he is about to solo a boss that would normally require a full-scale raid. In other words, Gamma is in way over his head, but there's no backing out now. It should take Chloe about 10 minutes to find help and return. Despite that, Gamma figures he only has 40 seconds to take down this overgrown fish before he suffers a fate even worse than the main characters. Rachel struggles to fend off the mermen, while Speed Weapon pours all of his energy into healing Lion. The wound is deep, but thanks to the blessings, it's slowly beginning to heal. Despite the critical task at hand, Speed Weapon can't help but keep his eyes glued on Gamma. Just the sight of the mermaid sends a shiver down Speed Weapon's spine, yet Gamma is determined to fight it alone. The demon strikes first, firing the same deadly beam that took down Lion. Gamma expertly dodges the attack and rushes in with his knife, closing the distance between them. It seems the mermaid primarily uses long-range attacks imbued with water magic. Gamma may not know much about magic, but he knows one thing for sure: this demon is still just a fish made of flesh and bone. To win, all he needs to do is get in close and start cutting. He leaps toward the demon for a slice, but it nimbly dodges and makes a beeline for Speed Weapon instead. Before it can reach him, Gamma intercepts it, managing to slice off one of the monster's fins and causing it to shriek in pain. The cut was far too shallow, so our MC lunges in for another attack, but the creature quickly dodges and dissolves into a pool of water. Since the mermaid targeted Speed Weapon, it seems she's deliberately preying on the injured members of the group. Lion is partially healed now, and Speed Weapon shouts out to Gamma. Seeing that he's okay, Gamma gives him a quick check before rushing back into the fray. From Speed Weapon's perspective, Gamma is unbelievably cool. During a previous conversation, Speed Weapon had mentioned how much he admires heroes who are willing to sacrifice themselves for others. So far, since Speed Weapon entered the Academy, he hasn't met anyone who truly fits the title of hero. That's why he joined Rachel's group, hoping to find that heroic quality in Lion. He'd even bluntly told Gamma that, in his opinion, Gamma was the furthest thing from a hero. And yet, here in this insane situation, the one stepping up and putting his life on the line is none other than Gamma. The mermaid resumes its assault, launching fish-shaped magic projectiles that Gamma expertly dodges. This time, however, the blasts don't just fly past him, they turn around and start to follow him. The mermaid can control these attacks, and they begin chasing Gamma all around the cave. With Gamma preoccupied by the homing attacks, the demon sees its chance and goes after Speed Weapon again. Gamma manages to intercept the monster, just in time landing a slash before it can attack, but the cut is shallow once again. He realizes he can't defeat it with these minor wounds. If he wants to finish this demon off once and for all, Gamma knows he'll need to land a deep, decisive stab. The mermaid fires another blast at Gamma, but he pulls off a slick dodge this time, causing the attack to punch a hole right through the cave ceiling and rocket into the sky. The attack was so powerful that cadets all over the mountain saw the light show, followed by a terrifying roar that echoed through the area. And to top it all off, it started pouring rain. An instructor with one of the groups suggests they grab the wounded and get a move on before the rain makes things worse. Back in the cave, the mermen finally start to fall back, giving the cadets a much-needed breather. The mermaid gets buried under rubble from the ceiling collapse, but Gamma has a gut feeling she's far from finished, and just as he suspected. The mermaid bursts from the rocks and charges straight for the students. All this time, Gamma had been holding back, trying to keep the injured Lion safe. Now that the mermen have retreated, he tells Rachel to look after Speed Weapon and Lion for him. Speed Weapon just can't wrap his head around Gamma, taking on a demon all by himself. He thought our MC was a madman before, but now he thinks he might be witnessing the birth of a legend. Meanwhile, Gamma is just happy that he can finally focus on the fight without having to worry about his teammates. He only has 10 seconds left of his painless blessing, and he needs to make up for lost time if he doesn't want to die. Gamma and the mermaid have a classic stare down before they both rush in for the final clash. Elsewhere, Chloe is sprinting through the forest as fast as she can, looking for help. She's exhausted, but she knows she can't stop running or else everyone she left behind will be in danger. Her body is screaming in pain, but the more she feels like stopping, the more she thinks about Gamma back in that cave fighting that monster alone for their sake. Gamma truly is the strongest person she has ever met. He clearly dislikes fighting and tries to avoid drawing his blade whenever he can. The only time he ever chooses to fight is when there's absolutely no other choice. Since Gamma made the call to fight the mermaid, she knows she has to do her part and get help. But she can't help feeling that if she were just a little stronger, maybe she could have been of some help to him. Behind her, a massive explosion erupts from the cave, and she knows it's the sound of Gamma and the mermaid fighting. Lost in her worries, she trips on a vine and almost face plants, but manages to catch herself and keep on running. She can't afford to stop until she's found someone to help. As she keeps running, she senses something up ahead. Her head is a mess, so she can't get a clear read, but her first thought is that it must be mermen. She draws her sword to defend herself and swings at the closest one, but surprisingly the figure blocks her attack with its own sword. That's because it isn't a merman, it's Abel. The moment she realizes she's finally found someone, Chloe's strength gives out and she collapses. Abel's teammates are immediately on edge, suspecting it might be some kind of ambush. Meanwhile, Chloe weakly tries to tell them that they need to go and help Gamma. Luckily for her, Abel recognizes her from when she and Rachel visited Gamma's class. Back in the cave, Speed Weapon is in complete awe of what he's watching. He wonders if he'll ever see a day as incredible as this again. The way Gamma fights is like watching a master swordsman effortlessly handle a live fish on a chopping board. At this point, this is way beyond just fighting a demonoid. Gamma is completely overwhelming it. The scene unfolding before him is definitely something that will be etched into his memory for the rest of his life. Even Rachel, who is the successor of the Spear Clan and grew up around powerful people, has clearly never seen skill of this caliber. Despite her amazement, she's the first to react, shoving him out of the way of a stray attack. Speed Weapon nearly forgot where he was because the fight was so intense. Gamma's opponent is a demon that uses magic. A blade against magic is never a good matchup, even if our MC has the upper hand right now. If the demon uses a spell that can't be countered, Gamma will be in serious trouble. As soon as Speed Weapon has that thought. As if on cue, the mermaid raises its hands and unleashes a different magic attack called Needle Squall. The raindrops all around them crystallize and freeze, and everything seems to halt for a moment. Then the mermaid drops its hand and all the sharp frozen raindrops plummet toward Gamma. He dodges some and parries the rest, but they're too hard for his knife. The blade begins to chip and crack as he defends himself. Instead of tossing the damaged weapon aside, Gamma hurls it at the mermaid. It cuts straight through the creature's side, leaving a gaping hole in its waist. Gamma then follows up with what should be the final attack, slashing through the mermaid's flesh with one powerful strike. Except the mermaid manages to dodge and use the body of another merman to distract Gamma instead. It then charges up a massive attack right in front of our MC. This one is way too close for comfort, and there's absolutely no way he can dodge it. Just as the attack is about to hit and panic sets in, his mind is suddenly whisked away to a clear, empty space. In that space, he sees a distinct red line showing him exactly where to cut, and a voice tells him that if he can slice it, the attack will be severed. Instead of trying to dodge, Gamma readjusts his grip on the knife and slices right through the magic. The slice unleashes a massive shockwave that rips through the area. By the time the smoke clears, Gamma is standing over the lifeless body of the mermaid. The demon lets out a few final gurgles, and Gamma just kicks his body back into the pool it crawled out of. Rachel and Speedweapon can only stare at the scene in utter shock. Somehow a freshman managed to defeat a demonoid all by himself. Suddenly, Gamma collapses to his knees, coughing up blood. Rachel is the first to snap out of it, rushing over to him, while Speedweapon goes to check on Lion. Thankfully, Lion is fine, but then they hear noises from behind. Speedweapon whips around, thinking the mermen that fled have come back for more. Instead, it's Abel and her team, carrying an unconscious and injured Chloe. The first thing Abel's eyes land on is Rachel gently caressing an unconscious Gamma. For some reason, the sight makes her blood boil, but she pushes the feeling aside to assess the situation. The rest of the team looks like they have one foot in the grave, yet somehow Lion seems completely unscathed. She informs them that she's already contacted the Academy, and help will be arriving in about an hour. With reinforcements on the way, she wants to know exactly what went down. She tells Speedweapon to start explaining, but he's more preoccupied with his frustration at the Academy and the instructors who swore they'd thoroughly checked the island. He doubts anyone would believe him anyway, but he begins to recount what he witnessed. Speedweapon gives Abel the short version of what happened, how Gamma single-handedly defeated the mermaid. Just as he expected, she can hardly believe it. Even the fairy tales her grandfather told her as a child sounded more believable than this. And yet, as ridiculous as the story sounds, the evidence all around them proves it's the truth. Besides, why would they lie about something like this? Still, Abel just can't bring herself to accept it. After all, she's a descendant of the acclaimed hero Baylor Yawen and his disciple Aaron Nilong. That's the legacy flowing through her veins, one that's given her a special attribute since birth. Her bloodline has always been overflowing with promise and potential, and she's put in an incredible amount of effort to ensure she wouldn't just be living in the shadow of her ancestors. And yet, even with every advantage and all the progress she's made, Kangama keeps proving that there's a ridiculously large gap between their skill levels. Abel can't help but feel a confusing mix of fear, dread, and admiration. She orders the healer in her group to start treating Gamma while they wait for the teachers to arrive. Getting a closer look, she can see he's completely battered and practically at death's door. And yet he fought a demonoid all on his own and somehow came out victorious. Abel can't help but look at him with a hint of envy. Speedweapon snaps her out of it, suggesting it would probably be best if they keep the finer details of what happened here from the instructors. The Academy claims they scouted the island beforehand, yet a demonoid just popped out of a cave that even cadets would have easily noticed. Something about this whole situation just doesn't add up. Lion cuts straight to the point and asks Speedweapon if he thinks there's a spy from the demon factions inside the Academy. Lion immediately tries to backtrack, saying that's not exactly what he meant, but they can't completely rule out the possibility either. It's undeniable that this cave is way too obvious for cadets to miss, and just as Speedweapon said, if it weren't for Gamma Lion's group, would have been torn to shreds. There were definitely conflicts, both large and small, during the 700-year truce, but there was never a time when the demons dared to lay a hand on the Academy's cadets. There was even a clause in the truce stating that an act like this would be grounds for an all-out war. Speedweapon pulls them back to reality, assuring them that they're probably blowing things way out of proportion. It's not a bad thing to be cautious about a possible spy in the Academy, but it's far too soon to be jumping to conclusions. For now, the most important thing is to get their stories straight. If there really is a spy at the Academy, Gamma will definitely become a target once word gets out that he defeated a demonoid single-handedly. Abel isn't totally on board with keeping things under wraps like this, but since Gamma went through so much for their sake, and the group seems to be in unanimous agreement, she suggests they talk to her grandfather first. The cadets finally get back to school and Gamma is taken straight to the hospital. He wakes up to the bright morning sun on his face, almost surprised to find he's still alive. The last thing he remembers is the mermaid firing off a magic sphere just moments before it died. It wasn't an attack that he could dodge, but he just barely managed to see it. He used his sashimi knife to cut through a line and the magic severed into two halves before bursting. Looking back at it, the magic sphere was definitely water. On top of that, after activating the sword god's blessing, he felt something that he couldn't describe. He calls his blessing just to make sure and the screen pops up in front of him again. His mental fortitude has increased by 1, and that's most likely why he didn't get scared when he faced the mermaid. It also looks like his assimilation rate has increased enough for him to unlock the mysterious attribute. The next attribute will be unlocked when his assimilation rate reaches 15%. Maybe this strange unlockable is what allowed him to see the red line to cut when facing the mermaid. As he's thinking about his blessing, the door opens and a familiar figure dashes in. It's Media, and she wastes no time wrapping Gamma in a tight hug. She fusses over him as Gamma tries his hardest to breathe through her death hug. She pulls away from him eventually and apologizes, but then reveals why she came to see him. She opens up a dimensional pocket through her purse. She pulls out the reward from the pocket, and it's what he had been hoping to get from the midterm exam, the Murasame sword. The Murasame is a B-rank sword with high-level stats, and it's exactly what Gamma was looking for. He stares at it in disbelief, as Media asks him if he likes it. She apologizes for giving it to him in this kind of situation, since he should have received it officially. Meanwhile, someone lurks at the door watching the whole interaction. Media calls out to the person and tells them to just get in the room instead of stalking at the door like some kind of shy creep. Siegfried Nibelung clears his throat and walks through the door, sheepishly, to stand beside Media. This interaction gives Gamma a strange sense of déjà vu, considering what happened when he first came to the academy. He asks what exactly the Sword Emperor is doing here as well. Media reveals that she heard what happened from his teammates. Then they both bow their heads and apologize on behalf of the whole academy. They are to blame for everything that happened during the midterms. Because of their negligence, everyone who was there nearly lost their lives. Gamma can't bring himself to speak as she continues to talk. She swears to him that they will uncover the truth behind the incident. Siegfried speaks up as well and thanks him for saving the cadets. Gamma nervously scratches his cheek and meekly tells them that he did what he could. Media continues and says that even though his actions were remarkable, they need to keep the incident under wraps. Media is sure that the mastermind behind this incident is in the academy, and they have to keep things quiet if they don't want this leaking out to the public. Gamma understands and doesn't hold their decision against them. Media smiles and says that sometimes Gamma acts like an old man trapped in a teenage boy's body. The two administrators leave the room and make their way back to the administrative block. As they walk through the halls, Media asks her old friend if he remembers the day they met. After enrolling in the school for the first time, Siegfried was lying on a bench, and she told him to move it. In response, Siegfried drew his sword without a word. Siegfried pretends not to remember anything, and Media smiles slightly. The whole thing feels like it happened just yesterday, but it's already been 60 years since then. Yet even with that, they haven't filled a tenth of Hawakan Academy's history. Back when they enrolled, the school was already ancient and filled to the brim with history. There were big and small incidents, but the academy nurtured and protected its cadets for 700 years. Suddenly, the atmosphere changes, and Media's aura causes the surrounding windows to shatter. Before the midterm, she received reports that they had completed multiple preliminary surveys of the island. Even though it was rare, Scopuli Island was known as a place for mermaid sightings, so she took every precaution to make sure that nothing would happen to her precious students. And yet, something terrible like this still happened under her watch. Siegfried places a calming hand on her shoulder and she snaps out of it with an apologetic look. Then she immediately switches to fangirl mode as she thinks about how amazing Gamma is. The fact that he took a mermaid down all by himself is incredible, and she asks Siegfried what he thinks. Siegfried has seen natural-born talent countless times. He has seen many names hailed as the chosen ones of their era, only for them to lose sight of their light. In families of heroes that are desperate for glory and honor, the word genius is recklessly thrown around. When a child shows the slightest bit of promise, they are called a genius because of their bloodline. It's also a word that he forbade from being used to describe even his own granddaughter, Abel. But for someone like Gamma with such unfathomable talent, the word genius might only truly apply to him. Siegfried can't help but wonder just how far he'll go once he gets more experience under his belt. Perhaps Gamma could even reach the heights that Siegfried himself could only dream of. Dodging her question, Siegfried walks past her but not before advising her to stay at the academy for the time being. She just smiles and follows him, and the two continue their small talk as they stroll through the halls. Later, Gamma gets out of the hospital and heads to class like any other day. Just as the headmaster instructed, it seems, the fact that he took down a demonoid on Scopuli Island has been kept completely under wraps. Gamma can't help but think his classmates are only this carefree because he was the one who stopped the mermaid. The first thing he did after being discharged was visit the school's forge to reshape and enhance Murasame. Right now, thanks to the sword god's blessing, the legendary sword feels more like a flimsy metal rod. So reforging it was an absolute must, which is why he went to see the blacksmith. Now, all he can do is hope for a successful enhancement. As he's mulling over the recent events, he hears Chloe call his name. He turns to see her hobbling towards him on crutches, her leg wrapped in a cast. Thanks to Speed's emergency treatment, the doctor said she should be able to walk without crutches in about 1 week. Despite her injuries, she looks like she's doing much better. Even though Gamma was the one who took down the mermaid by himself, it was a team effort that got them all out of there alive. Chloe's rescue call, Rachel, clearing out the mermen, and Speed's healing and blessings all played a huge part in their survival. The only one who didn't really pull their weight was Leon. Gamma has to wonder how Leon ever expects to defeat the Demon King with that kind of attitude. Then again, maybe it was just because he got injured so early on or something. Their conversation is cut short when their instructor barges into the classroom ordering everyone to sit down for a few announcements before the training assembly. Once all the students are seated, he informs them that they'll be getting a co-instructor. The students grumble about the sudden change until they see exactly who their new instructor is. Siegfried calmly walks in, and the entire class is stunned into silence as their own instructor Lee Wanbin bows to him respectfully. Even Gamma can't hide his shock at seeing humanity's strongest warrior walk into his classroom. Meanwhile, in a completely different location, an old man is thrown against a wall, then grabbed by the scruff of his neck and pinned there. A pink-haired woman slaps the old man across the face, sending him flying to the ground. He stammers an apology to the woman instructor Kim, who's struggling to control her rage. This woman who is mercilessly beating him is none other than the 5th Demon Corps commander, and she is not happy. She demands to know why he didn't cooperate when he had the chance. The man tries to apologize again, but that just earns him another vicious slap. It's obvious this pink-haired instructor is done with apologies. The entire point of her scheme was to have Leon come back from the exams half dead. He might be a hero candidate, but there's no way he could have taken on a mermaid all by himself. But now, thanks to this old man's incompetence, Leon is back at the academy safe and sound. Instructor Kim gives the elder another kick to the face, but immediately regrets it when she sees that she got blood on her shoes. She still can't believe that a full-fledged demonoid was taken down by a bunch of first years. But considering the new crop of students this year, she can't say she's entirely surprised. The elder then speaks up, clarifying that it wasn't a group effort, it was just one cadet. Instructor Kim assumes he's talking about Leon, but the old man corrects her. It was the academy's top student, Gamma. The Demon Corps commander instantly recognizes the name of the special admission student. And that single piece of information tells her everything she needs to know. It looks like she has some new prey to hunt. The prey in question, however, is currently being put through the ringer himself. Wolf class is going through their daily training regimen, with the exception of Chloe, who gets to sit it out with her cast and crutches. Gamma can't help but feel a little jealous that she gets to rest while he and his classmates are forced to run for their lives. And to make it worse, there's now an older man breathing down his neck after every lap, and he's surprisingly fast and nimble for his age. Siegfried easily keeps pace with Gamma, urging him to run faster and wondering aloud if he's still injured from the midterms. It's definitely strange to see the Sword Emperor himself running laps with first-year students, let alone paying special attention to one in particular. Siegfried Fonibolong is the man who will one day inherit the title of Sword Saint and become one of humanity's greatest assets. Not only that, but during the Second Demon War, he's destined to become Leon's swordsmanship master. He's a character whose importance skyrockets in the latter half of the story. So what is a man of his stature doing training with Wolf class? The main story has clearly started to go off track, and now it's pretty much falling apart. Come to think of it, Leon never ended up receiving the Sword Saint title, and that became a pretty big issue in his past life. But Lion can't inherit the Sword Saint family because he's not part of the Nebulong bloodline, so it doesn't matter. That doesn't make the situation any less uncomfortable for Gamma, though especially considering the jealous glares his classmates keep shooting his way. With how close Siegfried is to Gamma, it almost looks like they are running together. Siegfried also takes a moment to try and educate Gamma. telling him that the foundation of any warrior comes from their physical strength and endurance. No matter how talented or outstanding someone is, it's completely worthless if their body can't support it. Once he gets Gamma motivated, he runs ahead, expecting his student to keep up with him. After their running laps are done, it's time for field training. For this training, personal weapons are strictly prohibited. Instead, the students will have to use the weapons provided by the school and learn to master them. Siegfried dumps a variety of different weapons on the ground. He notices that there is even a sashimi knife among the pile. The rest of the students are surprised by this sudden condition their teacher has given them. One of them asks why it wouldn't be better to just use the weapons passed down by their families. That's because the basics are more important than anything else. The more a person relies on high-grade weapons, the more they'll start to neglect their training, and it's easy to mistake the power of a weapon for one's own strength. At the end of the day, a master can never blame their equipment. Those words really resonate with Gamma, and he nods his head in agreement. With no more room for idle chit-chat, the Sword Emperor tells the students to pick up their weapons and master the basics. Cadets who can skillfully handle ordinary weapons also have a good chance of receiving a high score in the class, which will affect their promotion evaluation at the end of the year. That little bit of extra information gets the rest of the students excited, and they rush to pick up any weapon they can find. Gamma naturally goes for the sashimi knife lying unnoticed on the floor. As soon as he picks it up, he notices Siegfried's eyes on him. The students gather together again after picking up their weapons, and Siegfried tells them that they'll spend the day getting accustomed to their new weapons by doing one-on-one training drills without a subspace. To make sure the students don't go overboard with their training, Siegfried suggests he give a demonstration of proper sparring. Lee Bin prepares himself to spar against the Sword Emperor, but he's shivering in fear, making it obvious that he's not prepared for this. In his whole life, this has to be the biggest crisis he has ever faced. However, Siegfried has a different idea in mind. He calls for Gamma to come forward for the spar. Siegfried is also holding one of the novice weapons from the pile of old tools, but in his hands the piece of junk looks especially sharp. The other students are still jealous and confused that the Sword Emperor himself is calling Gamma out personally. Gamma steps forward, and before they start, Siegfried asks if his bones have healed. Once he gets a positive answer, he tells our MC to pick up his sword. This is just a sparring match, but Gamma thinks this is way too much. If he crosses swords with the Sword Emperor, it's clear this won't end well. If things get out of hand, at least one of them might lose a hand. And if they're unlucky, a head might even roll. Despite those thoughts, maybe because of his divine power's influence, his instincts are craving a fight. Gamma tries to de-escalate the situation, saying he's nothing compared to the Sword Emperor, so Siegfried should lower his sword. His classmates mock him behind his back, making fun of him for chickening out of a fight. Siegfried isn't impressed either, and calls Gamma out for continuing to hide his power and his pride as a swordsman. Someone with such extraordinary talent has no reason to live like a coward. Pride is something Gamma had engraved in his heart ever since he claimed the title of the country's greatest swordsman. That same pride is also the reason he never put down his sword. The provocation from the Sword Emperor is clearly a test. If Gamma falls for it, he'll definitely regret it for a long time. Still, he can't ignore his pride as a swordsman and his urge to fight. Lee Bin notices Gamma's change in demeanor and rushes to stop what's about to happen, but Siegfried stops him. It seems Gamma has already made up his mind. Gamma pulls the sashimi knife from its sheath and prepares for a fight. The two stare each other down for a moment, and even at 70, Siegfried can vividly recognize in Gamma the same enlightenment he once gained through the sword. When he was younger, he remembered a one-armed wandering knight teaching him the way of the sword. The swordsmanship the knight demonstrated was undoubtedly on another level, and now he suspects the boy he's been watching since the allocation test, Kang Jama, might be the one to lead him to that same realm. Gamma takes the initiative and charges at Siegfried, but the swordmaster is ready and greets him with a slash of his own. Gamma is quick enough to dodge and then pivot for another strike, forcing Siegfried to deflect with his sword as the two clash again. Siegfried finds Gamma's boldness, charging head-on without a hint of evasion, to be almost inspiring. As the two continue their bout, Siegfried notices that Gamma's physical capabilities have also increased dramatically. He can even push the Sword Emperor back with such ease. However, his own sword isn't light either, and Siegfried is determined not to take this match lightly. Meanwhile, the other students watch the two fight, but they can't even tell what's going on. As far as they're concerned, Gamma just got lucky during his last subspace sparring match with Nox. And yet, even the Sword Emperor seems to care a great deal about Gamma, who's just a special admission student. They're hoping the Sword Emperor gives him a proper lesson that'll leave him in tears. And yet, after several minutes of watching, the two of them are just standing there staring each other down. Lee Won-bin, however, knows what's really happening. They aren't just standing still. They have reached a level that the Wolf class instructor doubted was even possible. Before the spar, he'd warned Siegfried that if the headmaster found out about this, things might get out of hand. On top of that, the other cadets could be affected as well. But Siegfried assured him he had no intention of crossing real swords with Gamma. The older man already knows that our MC has the power to enter a special place. This place is called the Mental Realm. To enter this realm and withstand a battle with Siegfried Gamma must be on an entirely different level than they ever gave him credit for. A duel in the Mental Realm is an intense battle of wits. And from the short time they've crossed swords, Siegfried can tell that Gamma is growing at an astonishing rate. If that's the case, the Sword Emperor may have to take things up a notch himself. He activates a powerful blessing known as Sword Spirit Protection. Even outside the Mental Realm, the students can feel the intense pressure emanating from the two of them. The blue light coming from Siegfried's sword is definitely some kind of aura. The battle becomes so intense that they both break out of the Mental Realm, returning to reality. Things are starting to get out of hand, and if Lee Won-bin doesn't intervene, there will definitely be bloodshed. Before he can make a move, though, Gamma and Siegfried launch at each other again, but a loud cry stops them both dead in their tracks. Medadia arrives before they can clash again, and her mere presence cracks the ground beneath her feet, a testament to her fury. The fight is over, and Siegfried is dragged back to Medadia's office for a proper scolding. He apologizes, but the headmaster is clearly not accepting any half-hearted words from him. She yells at him for going completely overboard and picking a fight with a student after she went through so much trouble to get him a position as an instructor. For a moment there, Siegfried had completely lost his self-control and exerted his full aura. He probably would have gotten an even harsher lecture for it. But the moment Medadia arrived and de-escalated the situation, he immediately turned to her and apologized. In the more than 50 years they've known each other, Medadia has never once heard him apologize. And yet today, he said it twice. That's the only reason she's calmly hearing him out right now. She asks him directly why he would unleash the Sword Spirit's blessing on a student. If Medadia hadn't arrived exactly when she did, things would have turned deadly. Siegfried tells her that if he hadn't released the blessing, he wouldn't have been able to gain the upper hand against Gamma. That stops Medadia in her tracks. For someone as prideful as Siegfried to admit such a thing, the situation must be truly unbelievable. She's aware of Kangjama's innate talent, but she also knows better than anyone just how powerful Siegfried truly is. Then he reveals that Gamma has already reached the Mental Realm. Siegfried, for comparison, only managed to master it when he was nearly 30. The fact that a 17-year-old has already achieved it is more than Medadia can believe. Siegfried doesn't understand it either, but he can't deny what he experienced firsthand. All of this new information is too much for Medadia to process, but then she remembers what she saw after stopping the fight and checking on Gamma. The moment she ran to his side, any semblance of her dignity as an educator or one of the 7 stars completely vanished. At that moment, the only thing she felt from Gamma was pure fear. It was the same kind of fear she'd felt when she met Voss, the 6th Division commander. She can't understand why she'd get such an eerie vibe from one of her own students, but it certainly makes Siegfried's crazy story seem a lot more believable. She then asks Siegfried point blank if he lost, and the usually calm and collected man becomes irate in an instant. He screams that even if Gamma's talent is natural, there's no way it could ever compare to his own. On top of that, he claims he wasn't even fully armed, insisting that's the only reason things turned out the way they did. Medadia calls him out for breaking his own rule about not blaming his equipment. Besides, is gear really a valid excuse when you're fighting a student? His over-the-top reaction just makes him look ridiculous. Her words enrage him so much that he tries to activate the Sword Spirit's blessing on the spot, but a sharp slap from Medadia snaps him out of it. Meanwhile, Gamma wakes up from a dream where he relived his fight with Siegfried. It all ended well, but man, that Sword Emperor is a real hothead. If Medadia hadn't stepped in, things could have gotten seriously dangerous. The Mental Realm is also a really weird experience. It's a state you can only reach when you've achieved complete mastery and understanding of your weapon. It's an active space that can be entered once certain conditions are met, and only true masters who have dedicated their entire lives to a single weapon can access it. Because of this, even in the game World Miracle's Blessing, fewer than 10 heroes could freely enter the Mental Realm. Leon, the protagonist, who was blessed with all the qualities of a hero, needed 3 years of private training just to get a foot in the door. That's actually when Gamma quit playing the game. And yet Gamma managed to do it instantly. Maybe it has something to do with his sashimi knife. Counting his past life, he's been using a sashimi knife for over 20 years. What's more, every time he unleashed the sword spirit's blessing, he'd experience a level of concentration that went beyond normal perception. The tangled threads of his current life and his past one are starting to weave together, helping him break through difficult situations. Based on his experiences so far, he knows that avoiding problems only makes them worse. Instead of just letting things happen to him, he figures it's better to tackle what he can and solve things one step at a time. Now that he can freely access the mental realm, he can probably try training in combat without having to rely on the sword god's blessing. He gets out of bed and slowly unsheathes his sashimi knife. Then after concentrating for a moment, he enters the mental realm once again. But in an instant, the realm shatters, and a massive hand reaches through the void toward him. It stretches down, and a single finger touches Gamma's shoulder, snapping him out of his trance and infusing the hand holding his knife with a powerful aura. Whatever that power was, it's too much for the knife to handle, and the weapon disintegrates into dust. Elsewhere in a dimly lit room, a group of elders is arguing. The old man we saw earlier talking to the Demon Corps commander is trying to reason with the rest of the Academy's elders. His main goal is to convince the other elders to investigate Gamma, suspecting he might be a hero candidate. The other elders disagree since it's common knowledge that the hero candidate is Leon. The elder argues that Leon is still half-baked and can't even properly manifest his blessing. Meanwhile, Gamma has shown obvious talent first demonstrated when he defeated the Genius Twins during the class placement exam. On top of that, Medea is also blocking any information about him under the pretext of student protection. Everything about the boy is just too suspicious, which means they have to investigate. He also reminds them that the 7 stars have been meddling in their affairs far too much lately. And ever since Medea, one of the 7 stars, became the Academy director, their position as elders has been severely weakened. After Basman was defeated, the public only paid attention to the 7 stars treating the elders like outdated relics. If a true hero were to appear, it would damage their reputation even more. The other elders agree, admitting they need some kind of public enemy to maintain their own power. They reach a unanimous decision: the hero who threatens the Demon King must be eliminated. This man only became an elder because of the purple-haired instructor, which is why he's pushing the others so hard. If he doesn't accomplish something here, then Aora, the 5th Demon King Division commander, will absolutely make him wish he were dead. After a bit more persuading, the elders finally reach a verdict: Kangama must be investigated and eliminated. To do that, they'll need to issue orders to the Aditor family. That's not the only problem on Gamma's plate, though. Right now, he's staring down the blacksmith he trusted with his weapon, who's now backing away in terror. Despite Gamma's hopes of using the Murasame as something other than a sashimi knife, somehow Volander managed to turn his only hope of escaping the sword god's blessing into an actual sashimi knife. And to make matters worse, the sword's rank plummeted from a B rank all the way down to an E rank. Even Volander is baffled. In his 30 years of forging weapons, he's never seen anything like this happen before. Apparently, when he tried to work on the sword, it was as if the blade itself refused to be forged. He had to quickly melt the metal down and reforge it, but he could barely manage to give it a proper shape. If any ordinary blacksmith had tried this, they would have just ended up with a useless lump of metal. Even with Gamma's 20 years of experience with knives, he can tell the craftsmanship is impressive. The specifications are also a perfect match for the sword god's blessing, but the hardness is still a measly E rank. The knife still has the potential to be a great weapon, though. If it's reinforced, it'll definitely become useful. All Gamma has to do is bring the reinforcement materials, and Volander will fix up the weapon at no extra charge. Gamma isn't convinced, though, and he angrily demands to know what will happen if it breaks again. Volander shakily assures him that even though it's an E-rank weapon, it has the growth potential of an A-rank weapon, and could become even more powerful. There's also the Never Fail material, which will guarantee the Murasame becomes stronger. But that material can only be obtained from A-rank or higher demonic beasts, and A-rank demonic beasts are on par with E-rank demonoids. So sending him on this mission is like telling him to go fight something like the mermaid all over again. It's insane to risk his life just to reinforce equipment, especially since even low-ranked demons drop reinforcement materials. Gamma demands Volander's promise, and the blacksmith swears on his honor. That aside, he wants Volander to refund at least half the cost for the leftover scrap metal, which is worth about 10 million won. Volander refuses, arguing that he made the weapon exactly as Gamma ordered, and even offered to do the enhancements for free. Gamma counters that his B-rank sword was turned into scrap metal, and considering its market price, his request is more than fair. Volander still tries to protest, but the glint of Gamma's new blade and a death glare are enough to shut him up. Volander, realizing he has no way out of this, tries to haggle the price down to 500,000, but Gamma counters with 1 million. That's still way too much for him, but Gamma isn't budging, and his sword is ready to prove its value in other ways. It's either the money or his life, and Volander finally agrees to the price. Later, Gamma finds a quiet bench on campus to take another look at his blessing. After obtaining the new weapon, his armament stat has increased, unlocking additional options. The main reason he's always hesitated to use the Sword God's blessing is the excruciating pain, but his new stats have reduced that pain by 1 level. This can be leveled up further, which means raising his pain reduction should now be his top priority. He tested it out earlier, and while the pain is still unbearable, it's gone from feeling like he was about to die to feeling like he can barely breathe. Still, if just 1 level reduces the pain this much, then, by constantly leveling it up, he might one day be able to use the Sword God's blessing completely pain-free. It seems his armament stat increases whenever he gets or enhances a new weapon. Now that midterms are over, weapon enhancement is his top priority for leveling up. If he keeps growing at this rate, he might finally be able to understand this power. Or maybe he'll even figure out who threw him into this world. While he's eating lunch on the bench, someone sneaks up on him, startling him out of his thoughts. It's Chloe, and it looks like she's recovering well. She's even taken off her cast, and Gamma asks if she's feeling all right now. She still needs crutches to get around, but she already feels stronger than before. While they're talking, Gamma notices a crumb of rice on her cheek and reaches over to wipe it away. The brief contact is enough to make her swoon and fall right off her crutches from pure joy. But from the ground, she notices the Murasame lying on the bench where Gamma was sitting. This is the first time she's seen him with an actual weapon instead of a kitchen utensil, so it's a pretty big deal. Gamma, however, is still bothered by the fact that it's E rank. And even though he managed to get some money back from the blacksmith, he still needs to gather materials to enhance the weapon and make it truly usable. There's no particular reason for Gamma to get stronger, though. Ever since he defeated the mermaid, he's been able to handle mid-tier magical beasts. The real reason he wants to enhance the weapon is simply to reduce the pain. Chloe mistakes his thoughtful expression for disappointment, thinking he's upset that she pointed out its E rank. She immediately decides, using some perfectly reasonable yandere logic, that the blacksmith who made Gamma sad must die. Gamma snaps her out of her murderous haze, but then notices they're being watched. He strolls over to a nearby tree and gives it a solid kick, causing an unexpected guest to tumble out. It's Nox, Chloe's brother, and he does not look happy about being discovered. Chloe is prickly about her brother's sudden appearance, but Gamma notes he doesn't smell of blood and isn't armed. Still, he was following them, so he must be after something. Nox is silent for a moment, leading Gamma to assume the worst, but he quickly clarifies he's not there for the usual murderous reasons. He came to warn Gamma that the Academy elders have requested the Aviator family to get rid of him. Chloe confronts Nox, asking if that's why he's here, but he dodges the question. Instead, he just tells her she's lost her edge after being away from home for so long. Chloe isn't having it and tells Gamma to get behind her so she can protect him. The two guys watch, as the girl, who's still not at 100%, desperately swipes at Nox from a safe distance before Nox continues his warning. Nox says he doesn't care what Gamma's been doing lately, but the elders are weirdly focused on him. It's not just him either. The entire Aviator family feels uneasy about the situation, so they've put the request on hold for now. The request was made in secret, even bypassing the Academy head. But since it's a direct order from the elders, it's pretty hard to ignore. If the elders keep pushing, the family will have no choice but to investigate our MC. Regardless of the reason, since Chloe is an Aviator, Nox felt she needed to know what was going on, and that clears up his motives. He might have come under the pretext of family duty, but really he was just worried about Chloe. With nothing left to say, Nox turns to leave, but Gamma stops him for a second. He wants to ask about that comment Nox made last time about Chloe getting weak from being with him, but the red-haired upperclassman just turns and keeps walking. Even Nox can see that Chloe is happiest by Gamma's side, so he decides to just let it be. Even Chloe has never seen her brother act this way. Before he leaves, Nox just tells Gamma to make sure Chloe doesn't get hurt anymore. Gamma's a little slow on the uptake, which only annoys Nox more, so he quickly agrees. Then Nox seizes the opportunity to ask Gamma directly how he got so strong, leaving Gamma surprised that he's even considered strong in the first place. In Gamma's opinion, to be truly strong, you need to be able to handle any threat at any time, like the Sword Emperor. Someone like him, who can only keep that kind of strength up for less than a minute a day, isn't in a position to be bragging about it. Nox used Chloe as an excuse to spill family secrets to an outsider. There's no way Gamma can trust the guy to keep his own secrets. So he decides to throw Nox a bone. He tells the redhead that he lacks desperation. No matter how skilled an adiator Nox is, there's a certain vibe you only get from someone with real-world experience. If he stays cooped up in the academy, he'll hit a ceiling. He needs to get out there and get some actual field experience. If he keeps at it, he'll definitely get something out of it. That's about as much BS as Gamma can spout without it being obvious. He's pulling it out of thin air, so he quickly bails before Nox can ask any more questions. Back in class, the students are getting a lesson on history and the nature of blessings. Gamma, however, is not focused on the lecture. He's more preoccupied with the news that the Academy elders are targeting him. The Academy elders are descended from 5 of Baylor Jawakan's 7 disciples. Gamma recalls that they're a group with huge influence, not just within the Academy, but across the entire world. In the game, their whole purpose was to constantly get in the protagonist's way, to protect their own power and safety, earning them the nickname the Corrupt Remnants from players. They're supposed to be targeting the main character, so why the sudden focus on Gamma? He jots down a few possible reasons why they might be after him in his notebook. Looking at his track record since starting at the Academy, he really has stirred up a lot of trouble. At this point, it almost looks like he's trying to stand out. But no matter what he's done, it still makes no sense for the elders to target him. One incident that stands out, though, is the mermaid he fought on Scopoli Island. It was clear the mermaid wasn't targeting him, but Leon, who's an obstacle in their path. No matter how well the media covered up the incident, the fact that he defeated the mermaid must have reached the ears of the highest echelons of noble society. And the fact that they were targeting Leon, a hero candidate, means that someone among the elders, or maybe all of them, is in league with the demons. They weren't just trying to obstruct him either. They tried to kill him. All of this just to preserve their own power at the expense of the safety of humanity and the Academy. The whole scheme is beyond rotten. Gamma could easily storm into the elders' chambers and cut them all down, but it's not the right time for that yet. However, when the time comes, Gamma will definitely take them all out. This new piece of information solidifies his decision to go to the dungeon to get weapon enhancement materials. First, he needs to gather a party since it will be too hard to do this alone. Clue would be more than happy to help him, but he needs other people too. Instead of a brute like Rachel, he needs to find someone more strategic. The first person that comes to his mind is Speed Weapon. After class, he heads over to the Dragon class to look for Speed Weapon. As soon as he gets there, he's immediately confronted by a brute who clearly doesn't like the fact that Gamma is a special student. This third-rate extra is definitely the kind of person Gamma finds annoying to deal with. Our MC walks away from the confrontation, warning the wannabe bully not to bother him unless he wants his jaw cut open. The brute immediately pulls back his fist, ready to start a fight. And to Gamma, the punch seems way too slow. Before he can retaliate, though, someone else beats him to it, smashing their fist right into the brute's jaw. The commotion attracts the attention of other students as Speed Weapon blows on his hand, which hurts from hitting such a hard jaw. Gamma has heard of strength mages, but a strength healer is definitely new. Speed Weapon then smiles and asks Gamma if our MC came looking for him. Gamma agrees to talk outside and explains his plan to Speed Weapon. The breakdown is that he needs to form a party as soon as possible, and he needs help recruiting party members. If they work together, the rewards from clearing the dungeon will be split among the rest of the team. In exchange, Gamma wants to keep the materials from the magical beasts. The reason he needs help is because in his class, if he announces he's gathering a party, no one except Chloe will come. But if Speed Weapon lends a helping hand and talks to people from the Dragon class, then things will go a lot more easily. Speed Weapon thinks that if it weren't for the Academy's rules, then Gamma should easily be able to clear 5 or 6 dungeons on his own. That would be true if he could handle the effects of his blessing without his magical painkiller. Gamma admits that he can't even clear one alone, but Speed Weapon doesn't agree with that, and thinks that Gamma is just being humble. They switch to some idle chatter, and Speed Weapon talks about how Gamma looks a lot better now after the events of the midterms. After some small talk, Speed Weapon accepts Gamma's offer, since there's no reason to refuse. And he has a feeling that working with Gamma will be a new experience. The dungeon Gamma has in mind is a C rank called the Buffalo Dungeon in Chowlin. Gamma, Chloe, and Speed Weapon means that they have a party of 3, so they just need one more member. Gamma says right away that he would prefer it if it weren't Rachel or Leon, but they wouldn't want to come anyway. Rachel has been in seclusion since Gamma was hospitalized, and she's been practicing in the Academy training grounds. Leon, on the other hand, is preparing for upper-grade dungeon raids with 2nd and 3rd year students. That's good news for Gamma, but it still leaves the question of who the last member of the team will be up in the air. There's one person that comes to mind for Speed Weapon, but knowing them, they are already asleep. That's insane news to Gamma since it's still the middle of the day. That's just how they are, though, and Speed Weapon isn't at all surprised. He tells Gamma that he will introduce the two of them, but first they need to go to the convenience store to get something. Later that night, they head over to what seems to be Speed Weapon's place. It's a Japanese-style building, and Gamma had no idea that the Academy even had such a place. Even during his time playing Miracle's Blessing M, he never came to this place. In his past life, he was a Japanese cuisine chef, but he never actually went to Japan, even though he always wanted to visit. They walk around the courtyard and get to the back where they find the person that Speed Weapon was talking about. And just as he predicted, she's fast asleep. He walks up to try and wake her up, but it's clearly not working. So instead, he leans down and whispers in her ear that he brought it. What that thing is, Gamma doesn't know, but it seems to wake her up immediately. Then Speed Weapon points at Gamma and tells her that what she wants is with him. And without wasting a beat, she sprints towards our MC and snatches the bag that he's holding in his hand. The speed she uses to snatch the item from his hand causes her to spin in midair and land on top of him. Gamma is left in shock as the new girl lies on his chest, eating the treats that he and Speed Weapon bought from the convenience store, all while he's trying to figure out what in the world just happened. While lying on his chest, she asks if he has any more yang, a sweet Korean dessert made from bean paste. In Gamma's past life, after a lifetime of nothing but work, he discovered the mobile game Miracle Blessing M, his one and only escape from a life surrounded by men. And like any true gacha addict, our MC sat hopefully on his porcelain throne after dropping a concerning amount of money, praying that RN Jesus would be on his side. The angel who had convinced him to spend all his money was none other than Abel von Nibelung. And just like any other gacha addict, he was immensely disappointed to find out that RNG is never on your side and is more likely to spit in your face as a standard yet equally rare character flashes on his screen asking if he has any Yangang. Her name is Saki Ryo, and her beautiful appearance on his screen only solidifies his belief that gacha games are a scam. Miracle Blessing. M's narrative is centered around the protagonist Leon and features numerous heroines. Among them, the character officially designated as the main heroine by the developers is Abel von Nibelung. Each heroine had her own unique charm and abilities, but the game's story mainly focuses on Leon and Abel overcoming hardships and the beginnings of their blossoming love. Even Gamma, in his past life as a filthy gambling addict, found himself captivated by Abel's charm and opened his wallet, dumping a concerning amount of cash to acquire her. As a result, the other heroines gradually faded into the background, and among them, the one who faded the fastest was Gamma's very first 5-star character. And just like in his past life, she has unceremoniously landed on his chest, asking for her favorite snack. When he doesn't answer her right away, Ryo turns away disappointed and calls him foolish. Despite how nonchalant and lazy she seems, Ryo is a top-tier DPS among all ranged attackers. She's also a skill-based character, unlike Leon. Plus, since she barely impacts the main story, her joining the party won't disrupt the plot. Recruiting her should be fine for Gamma, right? Speedwagon nervously holds up another piece of candy, which she snatches out of his hand before telling him to spit out what he wants from her. Speedwagon gets straight to the point, explaining that Gamma came to him this afternoon looking to form a team for the Buffalo Dungeon raid in 1 week's time. Ryo looks at him quizzically for a moment, then walks up to him and asks if he's the one who fought the upperclassmen back in the subspace training. Gamma doesn't answer immediately, and the two of them stare at each other, before Ryo turns and walks away without a care in the world. The dungeon cleared directly reflects on their grades, and there's no real reason for her to refuse, but Gamma seems to lack the conviction she was hoping to see. It's pretty odd for her to be judging someone when she's still half asleep, but she makes it clear that she doesn't want to work with someone who seems so unmotivated. Speedwagon tries to advocate for Gamma by reminding Ryo about the recent fight, but she still isn't convinced. Then, Speedwagon almost accidentally blurts out what happened during the midterms with the mermaid. He quickly covers his tracks before she can get curious and turns it around on her, reminding her that she drools over Yangang without a care in the world. Gamma just watches the two of them argue and he's not impressed. A party member can be greedy or rude, but not both. There's no reason for Gamma to waste his time begging her. He turns around and tells Speedwagon to follow him. They don't need her uncooperative attitude poisoning their party. Ryo coldly asks him if the dungeon raid is really that unimportant to him, and the two have another brief stare-down. Then, without warning, he pulls a knife concealed in his belt, and without looking, tosses it at one of her archery targets. The knife hits dead center. Before Rio can even process what happened, he throws another one, hitting the first knife perfectly on the handle. Rio falls over in shock as Gamma simply asks if she's interested in joining their party now. The next day, Rio is the first one waiting for them in the meeting room. She greets Speedwagon and Chloe, who both walk in first. Then she nervously greets Gamma as he sits down. They get straight to business. The permits for clearing the dungeon are ready, so it's time for them to strategize their approach. Speedwagon steps up to a board in the room and starts explaining the dungeon's details. The Buffalo Dungeon contains C-rank demonoid buffaloes. They're nicknamed water buffaloes and are known to charge from a distance before engaging in close-quarters combat. However, they are weak to ranged attacks. All things considered, it should be a straightforward dungeon clear, but the school has one strict rule for any students who dare to attempt it. They must never open the stone gate at the center. Rumor has it that there's some kind of seal on the gate, but that's just a hypothesis and nothing has been confirmed. The Academy's permit also requires that they leave the gate closed, so there's no reason to disobey. Gamma nervously agrees that they should never open it, but his tone suggests he knows more than he's letting on. They ask him if he knows what's behind the gate, and he lies saying he doesn't know and that they shouldn't touch it. In reality, he knows that there's a hidden boss behind the door and that the gate only opens under specific conditions. It's locked away by the system for now. Ignoring the risk of accidentally opening the gate, the farming efficiency here is unmatched. His attention shifts to Rio, who's happily munching on a snack. She seems to really enjoy candy, defending herself by saying that the brain needs sugar. As they talk, he senses something ominous in the area. Well, other than Chloe looking ready to murder any girl who glances in Gamma's direction, he knows they are watching him, and they will definitely appear when the time comes. Later that day, they begin their journey to Gamoldon, where the dungeon is located. When Gamma was discharged from the army, he swore to never go back to that city. But now, here he is, willingly organizing a trip, there with a group. The bus stops at a checkpoint, and the driver informs the armed guards that they are students from Hawakan Academy. It seems there are civilian restrictions preventing just anyone from entering the dungeon zone. He can feel the elders watching him, and he gets a bad feeling that something might go wrong on this trip. Speed Weapon pulls him out of his thoughts and offers him some eggs. Gamma refuses, and Speed Weapon asks if he's getting nervous over a measly C-rank dungeon. He then asks Rio if she wants some eggs, and her response is a swift no. She stares idly out the window, not paying attention to the group. But for a moment, Gamma feels her eyes on him. He already feels watched by the Academy elders, but now it feels like everyone is staring at him. The bus finally arrives at the place where ancient demons once nested. Now the area has been reduced to a simple farming dungeon. Speed Weapon notices that Gamma seems to have a lot of luggage and asks about it, only to find out that it's just a bag full of kitchen knives. The group walks toward the dungeon, and Chloe offers to take point as usual. And with that, they confidently head toward the dungeon. Just like at the border checkpoint, the guards at the dungeon entrance confirm that they are from Hawakan Academy, and then have the 4 students sign a visitor log. One of the guards seems particularly curious as he watches Gamma write his name down. Speed Weapon calls him over to enter the dungeon before he can talk to the man, and a large mechanical door opens for them. Gamma glances behind him one more time as the doors close, and the man continues to watch them from outside. On the dungeon walls, there are cute little signatures and drawings from students who have been here before. Looking at them makes this place feel more like a tourist spot than a dungeon. He feels a tug on his arm and turns around to see Rio looking tired and out of breath. She asks him if he has something sweet to make her feel better, and Gamma reaches into his pocket and pulls out a piece of candy. Candy isn't really her thing, though, and she asks him if he has any yonging. Gamma isn't here to babysit anyone and tells her to bring her own, but she explains she's saving hers for later. Their conversation is cut short as Chloe notices monsters charging at them from 200 meters away. Speed Weapon turns to make sure the rest of his group can stick to the plan. He starts to buff the attackers, and Saki pulls out her weapon, getting ready to fight. Gamma notices that her weapon is an S-grade weapon called the Crimson Bow. With a powerhouse weapon like that, clearing the dungeon will be a breeze. The question, though, is if he can trust Rio to do a good job, especially since she takes a second to munch on her favorite snack right before the monsters get to them. The monsters come barreling through the dungeon cave, and Chloe fearlessly rushes toward them with dual crossbows in hand. She jumps into the air and fires 2 shots from her crossbows, hitting 2 of them right in the eye. They fall back, and the others rush past their fallen comrades, still charging straight at Chloe. The red-haired girl pulls a sword from her back as Speed Weapon tells her to fall back. But Rio is faster, shooting 3 arrows straight at the monsters and taking out 3 of them before they can get to Chloe. Gamma is impressed by her skills, but he's more concerned about her breaking the horns he needs for his weapon enhancement. Regardless of her attack power, though a hard carry is still a carry and she's a skilled DPS that can't be stopped. They head deeper, but one of the monsters that wasn't fully dead suddenly gets up and charges straight at Rio before she can react. She turns to try and take it down, but her foot catches on a rock and she starts to fall with no way to defend herself. She hits the ground and scrambles into a defensive position. But luckily for her, Gamma is there just in time to catch her fall and strike the monster before it can get to her. Rio stares at him in shock as he holds her securely. Her mix of excitement and surprise comes out as a cute little hiccup. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, the same man who was eyeing Gamma earlier answers a phone call from an unknown person. It looks like a plan has been set in motion behind the scenes. Now that most of the monsters have been dealt with, Gamma takes his time collecting the buffalo horns he'll need for his weapon reinforcement. As he's collecting them, Rio comes up behind him and offers him a piece of Yangyang to thank him for saving her. He wouldn't mind accepting it, but Chloe's raw yandere aura from behind isn't exactly helping matters. He calls out to Chloe and whispers some instructions to her about the staff member they saw earlier. She acknowledges the information, and the two of them continue their hushed conversation. Speed Weapon decides to ask if they're dating since they seem so close. Clue blushes at the thought of dating Gamma, but our MC smoothly shuts it down, pointing out that not all relationships between men and women are romantic. Clue isn't happy about that and glares at Gamma, but she doesn't say anything. She changes the subject and asks why there are so few mobs in the dungeon. No matter how popular a dungeon is, it wouldn't be this empty. Rio also feels like something is off with how few buffaloes there seem to be in the dungeon. It almost looked like they were running from something. Buffaloes don't normally behave like that, so their movements are a bit strange. They are docile creatures, and locals in the area even use them for farming. Gamma can't believe that people would use demonic beasts for farming, but crazier things have happened. There's also something else suspicious, but Rio doesn't mention it. In any case, they have a cell phone signal to call for help, so things should be fine. As they make their way through the dungeon, Gamma asks Rio how she and Speed Weapon know each other. The reason is that Rio topped the written exams and Speed Weapon came in second. He bragged about it for weeks, and that's how they met. She also confirms that she ranked third in the placement tests. Gamma didn't take Speed Weapon for a loudmouth, but Speed Weapon surprisingly tells them that Rachel is his distant cousin, so being loud is in his blood. Being distant relatives also explains why Gamma, who was a player of the game, didn't know about Speed Weapon's connections to the villainous characters. Speed Weapon's family is a branch of the Changong clan, while Rachel is from the main family. That's why they at least know each other. It's not the time to talk about this, though, and Speed Weapon assures Gamma that he's living the dream. If anything, Gamma is the impressive one here, so there's no need to worry about Speed Weapon. Speed Weapon even says that Gamma could join the Seven Heroes, and Chloe agrees. But Rio doesn't say anything. Instead, she walks forward away from the group and declares that she hates the Seven Heroes. The others watch her puzzled, but they don't have time to focus on it. For now, they just need to work together to clear the dungeon fast and then go back. They need 20 kills for it to be considered a dungeon clear. As they walk through the area, Gamma notices some strange, cursed-looking claw marks on the walls. Speed Weapon and Chloe walk ahead, and they call out to Gamma to follow them since he was lost in thought. Meanwhile, outside, the man continues to talk to the mysterious person on the other end of the phone. He confirms that Gamma's group should have encountered the enraged buffaloes by now, and that he followed the person's instructions perfectly. He thinks that they should have been dealt with by the enraged buffaloes by now. The person on the other end tells the man not to be too cocky and asks him if he will take responsibility if their plan fails. The man can't answer the question, and the academy instructor just tells him to call back when he has results. The call ends and the man looks into the open dungeon doors. He's dead either way, so he might as well confirm things for himself. He also forced the gate open to make sure that their chances of surviving the dungeon are 0. But thinking back to Gamma's eyes, it's almost as if the teenager could see right through him. Just to make sure that things are going well, the man walks into the dungeon to check on the situation. Back inside, Chloe warns the group that more magical beasts are approaching from behind them. With her blessing, she can detect roughly 50 of them running in their direction. Suddenly, the earth around them starts to rumble as a stampede of buffaloes charges in their direction. This swarm is way too big, and it's hard to believe that those are even buffaloes charging toward him. They were supposed to be harmless, but this herd of buffalo is clearly being agitated by something. In that moment, Gamma's memory reminds him of something his mentor once said: every blade has its purpose. You can't use a chicken knife to kill an ox, and a sashimi knife is meant for fish. But Gamma's question about beef sashimi was like asking to use a delicate slicing knife to chop down a tree. His mentor raises the blade, and for a second, Gamma thinks he's about to get smacked. Instead, his mentor just grins at the perfectly sliced fish and has to agree that Gamma has a point. The memory makes Gamma realize he's in a similar spot now, about to use a fish knife to butcher a herd of cattle. With no time to spare, Gamma starts barking orders. He tells Chloe to get the herd's attention without charging straight in. He needs her to break up their formation without actually engaging them in a fight. Then he turns to Weapon with a grin and asks if he's ready. Weapon instantly knows Gamma is about to work his magic again and smiles right back. He was born ready. Rio, however, isn't used to Gamma's insane amount of plot armor and can't figure out why they're both so calm. Gamma then calls out to her, telling her to hold the front line and stop anything that breaks through. She nervously agrees, then whispers to Weapon, asking why Gamma seems so relaxed. Weapon simply tells her not to be shocked by what she's about to witness. A herd of 50 buffalo is still a massive threat, which is exactly why Gamma came prepared with an arsenal of sashimi knives. One of the buffalo finally breaks from the pack and charges the group. Gamma flicks his wrists, sending his blades flying like throwing knives. In a matter of moments, the 50 charging buffalo are reduced to nothing more than piles of fresh meat. Rio is so stunned she drops her yongang. The entire battle was over in a flash. Chloe had dashed in, using her feline's blessing, striking a few of the rampaging buffalo while expertly dodging the others. It was the perfect diversion for Gamma to work with. Then our MC leaped into the fray, his throwing knives slicing through dozens of beasts, only stopping when the roar of one of the buffalo momentarily stunned him. The other buffalo seized the chance to dogpile him. For a moment, Rio grew worried, thinking Gamma was being overwhelmed by their sheer numbers. But in the very next instant, the massive pile of buffalo on top of our MC exploded into chunks of meat, leaving only Gamma's team standing in the aftermath. After that incredible display of skill, Gamma casually puts away his knife and starts collecting the buffalo horns for his inventory. Thanks to his painless blessing, now lasting for 40 seconds, taking down the entire herd was a piece of cake. As Chloe runs up to congratulate him, he remembers that he couldn't have pulled it off without his party's support. While they chat, Rio just keeps staring at Gamma, completely awestruck. Weapon tells her she shouldn't be so surprised since he already warned her about Gamma's abilities, but admits he can't blame her for being speechless. Even he can barely believe what he just saw. Watching Gamma and Chloe standing amidst the carnage, they both can't help but wonder what kind of monster Gamma truly is. The group resumes their journey toward the dungeon's exit. The clear condition for the dungeon was only 20 buffalo, and Gamma managed to handle more than double that all by himself. Rio tries to argue that he didn't do much during the midterms, and Weapon almost brings up the mermaid fight, but he catches himself when he remembers that's supposed to be a secret. He quickly changes the subject, mindful of Rio's presence, and they continue on their way to the exit. As they walk, however, Clue points out that the area has become unnervingly quiet. They arrive at a massive pillar-like structure that looks exactly like the kind of gate you're not supposed to open. As they watch, the gate begins to rumble open on its own, the chains sealing it crumbling to dust. Meanwhile, in another part of the dungeon, the worker from earlier stares in disbelief at the mountain of buffalo corpses littering the corridor. He can't fathom how they managed to kill so many. His mind immediately flashes to the 20 billion won debt he owes to Charon Land. A few days prior, a woman claiming to be a Hawakan instructor had approached him with a tempting offer. If he followed her instructions, she would wipe his entire debt clean. All he had to do was use a demon stone to tame the buffalo, send them into a frenzy when Kangjama's group arrived, and finally open the stone gate in the dungeon's depths to seal their fate. He was hesitant at first, knowing she was asking him to sacrifice students, but the thought of having his debts erased was too powerful to resist. He accepted the stone, practically drooling at the idea of his financial worries disappearing. The instructor left, telling him she'd be in touch, and that he better answer his phone even for unknown numbers. With the prospect of his 20 billion won debt being cancelled, he couldn't care less about the lives of a few students. Now that the stone gate is open, he's certain there's no way they can survive. Gamma and his team step through the massive stone gates, trying to figure out where they've ended up. It all starts to make sense now why the dungeon felt a little too easy. They walked straight into a trap, and it's all because Gamma ignored his gut feeling. That gate only opens when the giant's demon stone is brought inside the dungeon. It's a mid-game quest item, and the fragments they found earlier were just pieces of its mana stone. He didn't expect the door to be left open with just those fragments, though. If this follows the game's story, then the reward for clearing this place is huge, but he needs to focus on surviving first. He can see something on the second door. There's a single red line carved into the stone gate. which is supposed to be indestructible, but he's used up all 40 seconds of his painless blessing fighting the buffaloes. The Murasame should hold out a little longer, allowing him to slash the gate and get out before it shatters. Before he can try it out, a massive presence causes the students to pause and turn around. It's a large buffalo that looks incredibly powerful. However, the reward for beating this massive buffalo is the Blessing of Transition, which is an ability that transfers and amplifies the owner's blessing to a chosen target for a single use only. The monster guarding this amazing reward is an A-grade demon called the Inataros Minotauros, also known as the Buffalo King. The torches in the room start to light up by themselves, illuminating the Buffalo King and 2 other large buffaloes beside it. The left and right flank buffaloes also look way more powerful than any of the others they have faced before. And the demonic beast, the Buffalo King, is also incredibly intimidating, even if Gamma slashes the gate so they can escape once the thing awakens. It will be impossible for them to escape unscathed. This isn't like the midterms, though. He knew nothing about the mermaid, but he's fought minotaurs before. At full strength, Gamma could take out 3 of them alone, but he has already used up all 40 seconds of his painless blessing. He needs to do this strategically. He asks Speed Weapon if he can cast a pain reduction buff, and he only needs it for 2 minutes. If Speed Weapon stops casting it for even a moment while Gamma is fighting, then he is definitely going to get taken out. He leaves the small fries to Saki and Chloe and tells them that he will take out the big one on his own. With the plan laid out, the students get ready as the Buffalo King wakes up with a menacing roar. Gamma activates the blessing of the Sword God and is immediately overtaken by a surge of pain that makes him cough up blood. However, thanks to the weapon buff, he can at least move. The demon charges in to attack, and Gamma rushes forward as well, dodging the first blow and darting to its side before it can recover. The pain from the Sword God's blessing is still so intense he's nearly vomiting blood, but he's at least strong enough to go up against the buffalo. Gamma parries another attack and then rushes behind it to try and bring it down, but his attempt is met with a swift kick from the massive beast, sending him flying. He catches himself before he hits the ground and spits out more blood. Even sensations that were dulled by the painless blessing are now returning. Instead, feeling the full power of the Sword God's blessing seems to make him feel free. Gamma rushes in again, dodging a massive swing of the Buffalo King's axe and moving at speeds the rest of the group can barely comprehend. The battle rages on with Gamma skillfully dodging all of the buffalo's attacks. In frustration, the Buffalo King raises its axe above its head and brings it down in a massive swing right over Gamma's head. As the dust settles, Gamma is revealed resting calmly on top of the Minotaur's axe, completely unscathed. Rio can barely believe that a human can even move like that, much less fight at that speed. She can't get distracted by Gamma's fight, though, as she's busy with one of the buffalo guards herself. She knows the basic concepts of combat. Things like muscle control, proper stance, and leveraging kinetic energy. It's all part of a combat sense used to break an enemy's center of gravity with minimal effort. However, knowing these things and putting them into practice are 2 very different things. As thoughts of Gamma fill her mind, she shoots an arrow straight into the eye of the buffalo, causing it to charge at her in a rage. In moments like these, even when facing death's door, Gamma still has an unshakable focus. His attitude reminds her of Sif, freed the Sword Emperor. She pulls back her bow aims at the charging bull and blows its head off with a single powerful shot. She turns back to Gamma and remembers a rumor floating around recently about a special admission student strong enough to make Kazagfried use his aura. Meanwhile, Gamma's aura isn't too far behind, and the fear causes the Buffalo King to rage out, trying to punch Gamma off its axe. Instead, Gamma cleanly dodges the punch and easily slashes the monster's attacking arm. Meanwhile, Chloe also manages to take down the buffalo she was fighting and wipes the blood from her face. She's still inexperienced when it comes to demonoids, but she knows that the more human-like they are, the deadlier they are. While it can vary, a demon that acts that human is definitely on another level of power. That means the one that Gamma is fighting is incredibly strong. The monster roars as it clutches its slashed arm and grabs its axe with the other, preparing to cast a magic spell. That's strange though, since demonoids can't use magic. However, looking closer at what it's doing, it's not actually casting magic. Instead, it's burning its life force in exchange for mana. It's hard to even approach the monster because of the rampant magical power. Yet even now, Speed Weapon blows into his flute with all his might. He still believes that Kangama can do something miraculous in this situation. The monster raises its axe, which is now completely fused to its one good arm. Then it brings it down on our weakened MC, who's still bleeding profusely from his mouth. Gamma raises the Murasame and blocks the initial attack, causing a massive amount of energy to radiate around him. He wanted to try cutting through the magic attack, but it's way too dense. However, he can't dodge the attack either since his teammates are standing right behind him and they would take the brunt of the attack. The Buffalo King continues to push on with its attack, and slowly Gamma starts to get pushed back. It almost looks like he's about to be taken out, but an arrow suddenly shoots straight into the monster's eye. Gamma turns to see Saki angrily telling him to stop zoning out and cut the monster down already. Gamma closes his eyes for a moment, then when he opens them, he's filled with a new power. Slowly, the axe begins to split open and the Murasami shines with a blue light. The blue light is very similar to Siegfried's sword aura from when he and Jayama sparred. Eventually, Gamma is able to push through the axe and completely cut through the Buffalo King, taking it down with a single slice. Even with everything they've seen so far, his teammates are still shocked by just how powerful Gamma is. The once terrifying monster falls to the ground in 2 large chunks of meat, and Gamma looks up at the dungeon ceiling as his nerves finally calm down now that he realizes he actually managed to cut it. Ryo stares at him in shock for a moment, finally understanding why Speed Weapon has so much faith in our MC. On top of that, his assimilation rate increased from 9.3 to 12.7. Speed Weapon falls to the ground, his lips sore and bruised from blowing on the flute for so long. At this point, Kangama continues to shatter every bit of common sense every time Speed Weapon sees him. The blue light that shone from his sword was bright enough to illuminate the entire cave. At such a young age, he's already manifesting an aura. It's hard to believe that he's even human. Ryo comes over and reminds him to breathe, shocking him back to reality. Then she tells him she understands what he meant earlier when he warned her not to be too shocked by Gamma and also why he keeps following Gamma around. Then she asks Speed Weapon if the Academy's rules stop Gamma from transferring to their class. That may be the case, but it doesn't stop a student from doing things the other way around. Ryo smiles, realizing now that she feels like tagging along with him too. Gamma struggles to catch his breath as the adrenaline leaves his body. Even with Speed Weapon's blessing, the strain on his body is still unavoidable. Still fighting without the blessing of painlessness is progress for him. Chloe collides into him, crying as she frantically asks him if he's all right. He tries to calm her down because her weight is making his already grave wounds worse. She backs away from him, blushing as he rethinks his life choices. A status window appears in front of him, informing him that he has acquired a new blessing. Originally, this blessing should have gone to Lion, and its rank is a spirit rank, which is the rarest in the world. It's a blessing that only reveals its full potential when combined with another. The blessing of transition can transfer an owned blessing to another living being or an object. However, the user must make direct physical contact with the target. It's an essential blessing for controlling the dual-natured Balmong, which is a sword that Lion will acquire later in his adventures. Since Gamma has found himself with this powerful blessing, he might as well make the best of it. Then he notices someone watching them through the now open stone doors. He asks Chloe if she remembers the favor he asked for earlier. Then in a second, she crashes into the man before he has a chance to walk away. Then she stabs a knife into the man's thigh, immobilizing him. Speed Weapon and Ryo have no idea what's going on, and Gamma calmly walks to the man while explaining that he asked Chloe to do him a favor earlier. The man tries to play innocent and asks what he did to deserve this. And the other two quickly pick up on what's going on. The rampaging buffalo horde and the open stone gate were all caused by this person. It's suspicious because there weren't any surveillance cameras inside the dungeon, but he just happened to show up at the perfect time. It's obvious that he was targeting them, but they have no idea why. Ryo quickly figures out that the staff member didn't pull this off on his own. Since he isn't talking, she threatens his life to get him to cooperate. Facing certain death, he caves and admits that an academy instructor approached him a few days ago, offering to clear his gambling debt in exchange for helping her take out their group of students. Speed Weapon is floored that someone would sell out a group of students over a simple gambling debt. The man tries to defend himself, but that just makes Speed Weapon even angrier. Ryo holds him back from attacking the injured man and asks for a description of the instructor. He tells them it was a tall woman with purple hair and eyes. Ryo quickly guesses it's probably their class's assistant instructor. Her sharp eyes made her stand out. Speed Weapon realizes she was probably behind the midterms incident too. Ryo asks about it, and Gamma finally tells her that they ran into a demonoid mermaid during their midterms. She puts 2 and 2 together, realizing Lion ended up in the hospital because he fought a demon. Now that the cat's out of the bag, Speed Weapon reveals that Gamma was the one who soloed the monster. After seeing what Gamma pulled off today, Ryo doesn't even question it. While they bicker, Gamma quietly stops the recording on his phone. He's gotten all the information he needs, which means the staff member has outlived his usefulness. Chloe rips her sword out of the man's thigh, causing him to scream in pain. A dungeon that was never supposed to appear just so happened to open, which means it's the perfect time to erase someone from existence. As Gamma turns to leave, he tells his group's assassin to take care of the trash. Clue wastes no time, her eyes switching to yandere mode, and his cries only last for 1 second. As Gamma walks out of the dungeon, he sends a mental challenge to Hawakan Academy's elders and instructors, as well as anyone else targeting him to bring it on. No matter what they throw at him, he'll make sure to erase them all. Gamma returns to the academy with his reward from the dungeon, the Cow King's Horn. It's the Horn of Minotauros, the boss of the Hidden Water Buffalo dungeon, which guarantees successful weapon enhancements for items below A rank. He asks the blacksmith to enhance the Murasame with the horn. The blacksmith is shocked that Gamma brought back an A-grade beast material. Even for a Hawakan Academy student, that's insane. He asks Gamma how he managed to take down the boss alone, and Gamma simply says he couldn't have done it without his team. Then he drops the battered Murasame on the table and asks if it can be repaired. The blacksmith Valander goes from excited to appalled when he sees that Gamma wrecked the E-rank sword he'd painstakingly crafted. But one glare from Gamma changes his tune entirely. With their business done, Gamma turns and walks off, leaving the sword with Valander. As our MC walks away, Valander wonders how his life came to this. As a little bit of revenge, he considers making the sword even shorter this time. Before leaving the shop, Gamma turns and tells Valander to use the leftover materials to buy himself a drink. Valander sighs, wondering how a kid like this just walked into his life. Back in class, Gamma takes a moment to reflect on his own growth. He's definitely gotten a lot stronger, but it wouldn't hurt to ask Speed Weapon for more blessings later. He takes a look at his blessing screen, which seems to get longer every time he checks it. The most noticeable change is his assimilation rate. Unlike his other stats, it jumps drastically after every major battle. It's likely that clearing another dungeon will raise it again, and maybe it'll unlock something even more interesting for him. Unlike his skyrocketing stats, though, he's been growing gray hairs ever since his first spar with Chloe. Now, Gamma's worried he's going to go bald after it all turns white.